This presentation provides an introduction to the components of service learning and how to conceptualize, implement, and assess service learning. But let's begin with the question. What does learning to play the piano and learning about service learning have in common? Well, even if you don't play the piano now, but took lessons a long time ago, there's a good chance you can recall parts or all of what you learned back when you were a kid taking piano lessons from the lady down the street. You might even be able to remember the names of the notes on the treble clef using the first letter mnemonic device of Every Good Boy Does Fine. Well, this presentation is a quick overview of the basic constructs of service learning using a first letter mnemonic device of OPERA to help you remember the steps and process, and each component is illustrated here with a case study. O stands for objectives, P is for partnerships, E stands for engagement, R represents reflection, and A is for assessment. When we operationalize service learning, it's cyclical. It begins with objectives, and they drive everything that takes place in a partnership with a community agency. And that's where students are engaged in service activities that are tied to the objectives of the course and the community partner. Throughout their experience, they reflect on what they're doing and learning. And then at the end, we assess to what degree the instructional objectives and the objectives of the community partner were met. When we think of objectives, we really are thinking of objectives squared because there's two parts to it. First, there's the instructional objectives, what you want your students to learn and do. And then there's the community partner objectives, what your partner wants to see happen. Let's look at this case study. The instructional objectives of an undergraduate business leadership course indicated students will demonstrate mastery and application of program evaluation skills that include data collection, quantitative and qualitative data analysis, and effective articulation of the results. The executive director of a nonprofit social service agency needed to conduct program evaluations to help with programming and to provide impact data to its board of directors and local government agencies. Pause this video presentation for a moment to jot down some initial thoughts about learning objectives you want your students to meet, and then resume the video presentation. Okay, great, but you'll recall there's actually another part to objectives. Service learning also involves and includes meeting the objectives of a community partner. And there's only one way to find out what those objectives might be, and that's to contact a potential partner, sit down, and ask them. Partnerships. The emphasis here is on partnership rather than on placement. Your Service Learning Center can help play matchmaker if you don't know a community agency that might serve as a partner. A community partner is not merely a site. They are a co-educator. They can help you conduct reflection with students. They could be a guest speaker in your class. They could even co-author or co-present with you. They might even serve on a departmental or program advisory board. They could even evaluate and help assess your students. Think of this as a courtship process. You're going to spend time getting to know each other, learning about the agency and its goals, sharing the instructional objectives of the course, looking at the course syllabus, discussing students' skill levels, identifying the agency's priorities, and then exploring if there's a match between the priorities of the agency and the instructional objectives. If it doesn't work out, you can always part as good friends. But if it is a fit, you move on and get engaged. And there's more on establishing partnerships in another presentation. Stay tuned. Pause this video presentation for a moment to jot down some initial thoughts about partnerships. Do you know some agencies to contact? Have you thought about roles the partner might play? Then resume the video presentation. Engagement. Now it's time to think about and discuss with a community partner just exactly what the students will be doing to meet your instructional objectives and their objectives that will help them achieve their mission. Let's go back to our case study. The instructor was introduced to the director of a nonprofit agency that had multiple programs, all needing formal assessment and evaluation. Together, the instructor and community partner discussed the instructional goals of the class and the skill level of the students, as well as the needs of specific programs. In this way, both the instructor and community partner were able to determine if a partnership was feasible given timelines, logistics, and student skill level. In engagement, you're going to determine who is doing what, when, and where. And this is the meaningful action designed to meet course objectives as well as the needs of the agency. In engagement, you develop a covenant and an action plan, and students are allocated a specific amount of time outside of class, either directly on-site or indirectly off-site, to complete community-based assignments, just like any other traditional type of assignment. Let's look at a typical semester that consists of 15 weeks. Many service projects consist of 1 to 2 hours every week over the course of the semester. But some service projects may have a bulge right in the middle. For example, a service trip to New Orleans after Katrina. Students might spend the first 4 or 5 weeks learning about New Orleans and Katrina before actually going there and spending a week in service and then returning. Then there's the roller coaster effect, where a service project may involve some initial intake and work with a community partner, and then returning to the classroom for a few weeks to develop a project, and then returning to community site to actually implement it. So you see, there's no one way that the students are spending their time over the course of the semester. It depends on the objectives and the service project. Let's go back to our case study. Students gathered and analyzed data for the community partner over the course of a 15-week semester with a specific deadline. Students were actively engaged in applying the skills they were learning about in program evaluation in their leadership course. And in turn, the community agency was getting much needed information they did not have the time nor expertise to gather themselves. The results were presented in a formal report that could be used by the partner for programming, reports, and grant writing. Pause the video presentation for a moment to jot down some initial thoughts about what you want your students to be engaged in and consider the timelines that might look like, and then resume the video presentation. Reflection. What comes to mind when you hear the word reflection? Do you think of written reports, journals, group hugs? Well, reflection is not a technical report of data or observations. Technical reports are intended for another person or audience, whereas reflection is primarily a personal exercise intended for the individual having the experience. Reflection is the intentional consideration of an experience in light of instructional objectives. Reflection can take many formats. It can be done in written formats like journals or papers. It can be done orally in discussions, either in large groups or small groups, or even individually. They can even be done in simulations and debates. And there's many methods and techniques as well. One is the ABCs of reflection, in which students are invited to reflect on the affective experience they had, as well as the behaviors of what they did, and to make concrete connection to class content to assess their cognition and the experience. There's other methods as well, such as the what, so what, now what method, and your Service Learning Center can help you learn more about reflection. Reflection takes place before, during, and after the service. Let's go back to our case study. Beyond debriefing on their experience of applying new technical skills, students reflected on the mission and the need for the community agency. And using the ABC's rubric for reflection, students were able to intentionally consider how they were feeling about the experience itself, as well as the mission and purpose of the agency addressing critical social issues. They also were able to reflect on what they were doing as students, but also what they might do in the future as professionals and citizens to help address the underlying social issues the agency works with. They also reflected on what they had learned in terms of leadership skills as well as what they had learned about their own role and responsibility as citizens in a just and democratic society. Pause the video presentation for a moment to jot down some initial thoughts and impressions you have about reflection. Do you have some new insights as to what it could or might be? Then resume the video presentation. The last step is assessment. Here we want to determine if the instructional objectives and the community partner objectives were met. Traditionally, this has been done through exams or papers. But actual products developed in a service project also indicate mastery and application of information and skills. Pre- and post surveys on attitudes can also reveal different kinds of student growth. Content analysis of reflection journal entries can provide qualitative information to document growth and development. Let's go back to our case study. The analysis and report was actually an authentic form of assessment, as the students demonstrated mastery of skills and concepts from their course by actually applying them. The instructor's objectives of developing program evaluation assessment skills was indeed accomplished. But the community partners' objectives of obtaining valuable data was also accomplished. Beyond the summative assessment of achieving mutual goals, the instructor and community partner conducted formative evaluation to assess the overall experience as a way of identifying what worked and what didn't work, using this to help forge future partnerships. Pause this video presentation for a moment to jot down some initial thoughts about assessment. Do you have any new insights as to what assessment could or might be? And then resume the video presentation. So, we're back where we started. The objectives were determined to forge partnerships, to have students engage in meaningful service to meet those partnerships and objectives, and to conduct reflection and assess whether or not the objectives were actually accomplished. So, are you ready to go out and do service learning on your own? Well, probably not, but you do have a good overview as a foundation to build from. There are other video presentations that go into much more detail on the components that were introduced here. More information on things like reflection, direct service, indirect service, community-based research, and capacity building. So, just for fun, pause the video and see if you can recall each step presented here. See, that wasn't so hard, was it? And while watching a training video on your computer is a good start, it's not enough by itself. Be sure to meet and consult with staff at your Service Learning Center for ongoing support. Thanks for watching.